I hesitantly went on a Tinder date in college, and it didn't go well. But it was nothing like this. What is up, Netflix fans? Welcome back to my channel. It was like 8 years ago. I got out of there so fast. It was a weird date. But today, we are talking the Tinder Swindler, and oh my goodness, this is a crazy documentary, and I had to talk about it. Even with my voice slowly continuing to go away, there's something wrong. I had a fever a while ago, but I'm not going anywhere, so don't worry. This is my bunker. I will never leave. This documentary is going to make some noise. I want to talk about it. So the Tinder Swindler tells a jaw-dropping story of a prolific con man who posed as a billionaire playboy on Tinder and the women who set out to bring him down. We start out with our main character of Cecilie, who matches with this good-looking, handsome billionaire playboy, and she can't believe when it turns out to be the man of her dreams. That's how it normally goes. But then she discovers that this international businessman is not who he says he is. Where this fairy tale ends, a revenge thriller begins. Cecilie discovers that there are other targets, and they all come together. They are victims no more, and they go after this man of many names. The Tinder Swindler inevitably meets his match. This comes to us from the producers of the Imposter and Don't F with Cats, which was another documentary that made waves. I feel like this is going to do the same thing, especially for those that have used Tinder or any of the numerous, I don't keep up with it, there's like 20 dating apps that people use to go on dates and to live their lives. But what these women were not aware of is that they were all being played by this one man who, don't take this the wrong way, is good at what he does, but that doesn't make him a good person. He's a terrible person. And this is a documentary, so I'm going to go a little more in detail than I normally do with reviews. The biggest thing about this film, and this is probably the biggest spoiler that I'm going to talk about, so if you don't want to know anything, do the double click thing on YouTube, skip about 10 to 15 seconds. He's still out there. How is this man still out there? It's ridiculous. It's so stupid. It's so stupid. Makes me mad. But we go back to our women that he was able to swindle, and you look at some of the decision making here, and that's one thing you can question just from a logical standpoint. It's like you're taking out a loan, you're bringing all of these things out of your savings, things that you need to survive, and paying this man when he asks you to pay him. And that's essentially what they're doing all throughout the documentary. At 10 grand, 20 grand, $30,000 for him to inevitably take that money and spend it on somebody else. First of all, there are so many decisions in this documentary where I sit back and I just go, how? Why? But then you look at the mentality of these individuals and kind of how they got mentally and emotionally sucked in to this situation, and the fact that he was playing the long game. He would go for a month or 2 months just to get them in to his emotional prison, if you will, and it's absolutely terrible what he did to these women. It's terrible, but it's also just baffling the fact that he was able to continue doing this to the point to where he had numerous victims. And I'm sure there were more victims, and maybe there still are victims that didn't even come out and talk in this documentary that didn't want to. But for those that did, even with all of the madness and, the judgment that's coming their way, some of it is warranted, but not all of it. The fact that they came out and said, you know what, we're going to make this documentary, we're going to allow all of this stuff to come to light, that's pretty impressive. That's really, really impressive. And you love seeing something like that. You love for the truth to come out. Of course, it's going to be biased in the direction of the individuals behind this documentary, but everything that I saw, well, that told me enough. And this is a man who had been there and done that prior to this group of women and went to prison for his crimes, but it didn't do anything. He came out and he wanted to do it again, and that's what he was doing. So it's the long game of going about it in a way that makes for a compelling documentary, finding people involved on the other side of things prior to him going to jail, and now they're working with him. It's like all of these crazy things, man. It's one of those documentaries that is so crazy, you just don't believe any of it is real. Now, one thing this documentary does that we see in every documentary like this is we get the reenactments, the scenes that, clearly are staged using actors and recreating the texts and all of those things. I mean, I'm sure some of the messages were actually real, but recreating the moments, sometimes that can come across as effective, but I didn't find it to be effective every single time in this documentary. I found those moments to make it more cheesy than the situation actually is. I honestly could have just done without that, but I understand you have to make it more cinematic to a degree. But on the other side of that, it is your standard, interviewees talking documentary. But when the subject matter is super compelling, like it is now, that doesn't bother me as much. My biggest complaint with this documentary is just that it takes a long time to get to the really interesting parts, in my opinion. I understand you have to build up Cecile's story and then all of the other women that come in and tell their story, and then there's a third major woman in the third act of the film that comes in, but there's just so much to it to where I feel like we could have cut 20 minutes and made this a solid 90-minute documentary, because I will admit I was losing interest in the first third, and not until we start to realize what's actually happening, that's when the documentary really picked up for me and all of these crazy things that happened. So that's when I was fully on board with what was happening. And at the end of the day, it's one that causes you to look at everyone involved, those that fell for his con, the man behind it, obviously, and just the fact that this happened in the first place. It doesn't feel real, but obviously it is. So before I give you guys my score, I want to say thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this review, be sure to drop your thumbs up down below. This is a baffling true story, and it is one that will upset you in ways that you never anticipate after seeing the title. It may not be the most well-made documentary I've ever seen, but the subject matter is absolutely wild. My score is a 72%. I really enjoy this. It's engaging. It's everything you want a documentary to be. It's also infuriating, and you're just scratching your head while watching. So it's going to cause a lot of conversation. I need your thoughts, comments down below. Let me know. I'm going to go gargle with some salt water because this is ridiculous.